Hey everyone, Jim Coventry from RotoWire here. Sorry I'm late with the show. I should have been on a little bit earlier, but I wasn't able to quite make that time. So we will get rolling here. So news for today. We'll start out with the Vikings passing game. I know it's a lame point to start with, but the news piece that I brought up was Jalen Reagor was acquired from the Eagles by the Vikings. And if you remember, it was the Eagles who could have drafted Justin Jefferson, but they rolled the dice on Jalen Reagor. Didn't work out. Now the Vikings have both. Why is the Reagor story important? It really isn't, because I just want to point out that right now, Reagor is in the mix. We know KJ Osborne's a 3 and Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson have the 1 and 2 spots locked down. But is it possible that Jalen Reagor's talented? We've seen him on occasion flash, very rarely. We know he can return kicks, so he has some explosiveness and agility and things. Is it just possible a change of scenery could make things happen for him? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not betting on him as fantasy option, but here I want to point out the entire Vikings passing attack, and let's just break that down for fantasy right now. So the first thing is with the Vikings, Kevin O'Connell comes over from the Rams and he brings in that style of offense. And we go from Kirk Cousins playing under the Mike Zimmer system, where they often would play with heavy personnel. They would often see defenses that were expecting the run, and they ran in the heavy boxes too frequently. And then when they were in passing downs, they would put the third receiver on the field. The defense would put the extra defensive back out. And honestly, they were never throwing in optimal, not never, but rarely throwing in optimal situations. And the NFL is all about math. It's creating numbers to your advantage and taking advantage. Well, Kevin O'Connell is going to do that. And actually what I liked was we just saw little things in their camp, like the handoffs to the running back in motion, like we saw with Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp and other Rams receivers back in the day. Well, we're seeing that in Vikings camp now. And what that does is, first of all, that motion dictates to the defense if they're in zone or man. It gives a free read to the quarterback. Even if they don't hand the ball off, they point out their defense, because if the corner follows the receiver in motion, they're playing man. If they stay put, they're playing zone, and the quarterback now knows which route combinations to go with. So just those little things are going to make Kirk Cousins' life a lot easier. And I would expect Kevin O'Connell to use a fair amount of play action. The Rams were sporadic with it at times, but I think O'Connell got the times when they were more effective is when they were using play action. It worked for Jared Goff. Back when that offense was humming along before they had to rein it in when he struggled. So anyway, my point is this. Kirk Cousins is an optimal situation here. He averaged 538 pass attempts over the last 2 seasons. I think we're going to see him flirt with 600. And if we're going up 60 pass attempts, and last year I know he was a little closer to 540, I believe, maybe even 550. But I think Cousins is going to see a jump here. But it's not just the pass attempts. It's the type of pass attempts. Like I said, we're flipping the math on defenses now, where Cousins will have more favorable throws. Especially Justin Jefferson is going to be much more weaponized than he was under the former scheme. He'll be motioned. He'll be moved into formation. He'll play more out of the slot. They'll find ways to weaponize him and get the absolute ceiling out of who is one of the absolute best players in the NFL. Now, Adam Thielen, he's aging, and we've seen his production drop over the last couple of years. We've seen 2 of the last 3 years he's missed time with injuries. That's what age does, right? And so I don't know what we're going to get out of Thielen, but what I'll tell you is when he's on the field, it's going to be a more expansive role. He's not going to be using the same predictable role. Obviously, he doesn't have a lot of this, any speed he had. That's diminished as well. So he is going to be, I mean, think of Robert Woods when Robert Woods is with the Rams. We could see a very similar type of role for Thielen here. And I think Thielen will be up for the challenge. Now, again, I don't know how many snaps he handles. I don't know how long he holds up or if decline sets in. Those are things we do have to be concerned about. So in terms of fantasy, boy, I like Thielen a little more DFS early in the season. I do struggle to make a commitment to him in season-long leagues because I just feel the declining player aging. It's just a recipe. I'd rather be a year year, too early and letting a player go as opposed to a year too late, and that maybe the cliff could be close. But if you like Thielen, I totally understand, and there would be an advantage taking him at ADP. If he holds up, he will blow away that ADP number. Now, KJ Osborne's the next one, and he does have the number 3 role. And as opposed to last year, they actually had to use 3 receivers more than they had in the past, the Vikings did, because of the injury to Irv Smith when he was out for the season. So Osborne did play a fair amount in 3 receiver sets, which were used more often, the 11 personnel, again, 3 receivers and 1 tight end. But I think now we're going to see that percentage go up in the 75% range for Osborne, and it may even border 80 and 85. I mean, when we saw Zach Taylor take that offense, he went up in the upper 80s, and McVay last year was in the upper 80s. So Osborne could be nearly a full-time player, and I think that makes him an excellent fantasy value because snaps and opportunity really have a lot to do with production. I'm not quite sure where I fall on Irv Smith. Tyler Higbee had that great run at the end of the season a few years ago, and it was like the ultimate storm of easy defenses against the tight end. And the one defense that was tough was the 49ers, but they had 3 injuries, and they weren't even able to defend the tight end. So, I mean, if we throw that out for Higbee, the rest of his career has just been ordinary. And is Irv Smith really better than Higbee? Because Higbee's pretty good. So I think ultimately Irv Smith, where he's drafted, fine, tight end 12. I don't see a big upside here. I don't see him putting up an 850-yard season and 8 touchdowns. I think the receivers are going to be the main beneficiaries. And of course, I'm very high on Delvin Cook. I believe he's going to be fully weaponized, but I'm talking about the passing game, so I'll stick there. Kirk Cousins is a great value in fantasy leagues. And look, say what you will about what his big game performance. Some people knock him for that. Look, and for fantasy, this is the best situation he'll be in. And I believe that Kirk Cousins is going to thrive here. And the offensive line, Christian Darrisaw is in the second year. He's going to boost a little bit. I think the line's going to be more than good enough, but I think the scheme they're going to use is going to get receivers open quickly. So you can get Kirk Cousins outside the top 12 quarterbacks, but I think he could finish as high as quarterback 10 this year. He doesn't run, so he's not going to give you that upside on that and from that perspective. But you know what? I could easily see him throwing for 45 touchdowns a season if things go right. And if they don't go right, 37, 38. And he's been throwing in the 30s the last couple of years. But I think his yardage is going to go up. That's the big thing. Because if we're talking an extra 60 passive better scheme, that works. So overall, that's my breakdown. I'm really in on most of them. I'm just worried about Thielen with the aging. Osborne, where his ADP is beautiful. If I'm not taking Kenny Gainwell, when he used to fall. Gainwell isn't fall there anymore, I don't think. But again, Jefferson, obviously, he's top 3 pick in fantasy drafts. If he goes later than that, he's an absolute steal. All right, let's talk some other stuff here for today. T. Higgins, we're having injuries here. So he did return to 11-on-11 practices on the 14th of August, but today he wasn't spotted on the field, the practice field. So it was Wednesday, and he has a shoulder issue. Now, there's still over a week and a half to get ready for week 1. It's possible he's still trying to return to full health. Maybe it was a rest day. So don't worry just yet. But if he continues to miss multiple practices, we have to wonder what his true status is, and that would be a little concerning for the passing attack if they didn't have T. Higgins. That said, we'll go to Darren Waller next. So apparently he was expected to practice on Wednesday. Didn't get official word as to whether he showed up, but that means he's close. And so unless he has another setback, because he did have a setback, he was back on the practice field for 1 day, and now it's been weeks since then. So it was a pretty bad hamstring injury. But the fact that they're not resting him further means he's probably beyond it right now. So I think if you're drafting him, draft him as if he didn't have the injury. I think that's a fair way to go if he's ready to come back now. Now, hey, if you're injury averse and you're nervous about injuries, you want to avoid it, then maybe you say, you know what if he has another setback? I would think they managed him well enough. But again, that's out there. Now, Zach Ertz and Rondale Moore. Cliff Kingsbury said that in terms of week 1 availability, Ertz with a calf and Rondale Moore with an undisclosed injury, he said it'll be close as to whether they're ready for week 1. So that means right now, they're, unless he's lying, legitimately questionable. Well, that gets me a little nervous for week 1, but I mean, bigger picture, sounds like if they're close for week 1, then they're probably fine for week 2. So I think long-term, it's not an issue and you draft them as you would. But if you're looking at the Cardinals in week 1, DeAndre Hopkins is out with the suspension for 6 games, if we don't get Ertz, if we don't get more, that could be a problematic week. Maybe not for James Conner, although defenses might load up to stop him if that's the case. So it really could be a slow start if they miss. But if they're if they're in the lineup, then it's wheels up, because I really do think adding Marquise Brown to the mix, and that they use Rondale Moore well. Remember, Rondale Moore had a couple really good games to start the season, and then all of a sudden they started to use him on just these weird runs and screens, and they just totally stopped using him. And I know one of the beat writers from Arizona who I was listening to point out the coaching staff realized that they kind of dropped the ball on that. So hopefully they figure out a way to weaponize Rondale Moore. All right, Drake London's next. Now he's into his 3rd week of missed time with the knee injury. The coaching staff said it was minor, but it's 3 weeks. Now we still got, again, maybe 11 days or so till opening day, but he's missing reps, Now, I was listening to John Hanson's podcast today, and he had said that he talked to Roddy White, who's a former receiver in Atlanta, who apparently must be in watching practice. He said Drake London has been getting separation from defensive backs when he's playing, and if it's against AJ Terrell or their dynamite corner, that would be wonderful. He didn't say that, but nonetheless, I still think that Kyle Pitts is the guy there. I think he's in a command, but somebody else is going to get targets as well. Now, what my worry was when Marcus Mariota's there, I just think back to those days in Tennessee. In Tennessee, Corey Davis, he couldn't connect much with him, outside receiver, but it was Delaney Walker, and they just really got it going. Now, many of you follow my stuff. You hear that I'm super high on Kyle Pitts, and you're like, why? The offense is a trash heap. I get it, but I already mentioned the point with Mariota and the tight end. Now I want to go one further. Arthur Smith, does anybody use play action more than he does? Now, Arthur Smith made a mistake last year. They were throwing short of play action, which I don't know what he was thinking there, but that was a problem, because that's exactly when you take your shot. Well, if they figure that out for this year, and you could weaponize Pitts more in the slot. Look, if Pitts gets less than 1,150 yards, I'd be stunned. Now, we don't know what the touchdowns are going to be. How much are they going to move the ball? But look, if he gets 6 touchdowns and, he puts up that 1,150, 1,250 in the yardage, he is going to have a fantastic season. And in terms of targets, I mean, he's got to get 8 targets a game minimum. I would think 8 targets most games. And so, yeah, I'm all in on him. I think there's going to be a great fit for what Mariota is going to have to do. And when Desmond Ridder eventually gets in, I'm really not worried about that either. All right, Michael Gallup's next. So the Cowboys organization has said Gallup's unlikely to play in week 1, but Mike McCarthy, we never really can know what's truth or fiction when he says it, but he says that Gallup looks excellent and he's avoided setbacks. So it's possible we see Gallup early in the season. Here's my concern. So Gallup, he's not just a deep threat. He's very good at that. He can run other routes as well, but I think he makes his best fantasy splash when he's making big plays. But here's the problem. Tyron Smith is, out for a long time, maybe the whole season. We know Lyle Collins and Connor Williams are gone. We don't know what the rookie Tyler Smith's going to be like on the offensive line. A lot of good scouts think he's like Green. He's have to learn his way, figure things out. And ultimately, if Dak Prescott isn't protected, it may be very difficult to develop a downfield passing game. So Gallup may still get good catches in other areas of the field, but I think that downfield element may not be there. And I think that takes away some real upside that he would have otherwise. Of course, where you're getting him in drafts is if you think he's going to be healthy early, I think there really is very little risk because you're getting into the double-digit rounds pretty safely. So that would at least you'd have a floor play for sure because somebody has to get targets aside from CeeDee Lamb. We know Jalen Tolbert will be involved, but Michael Gallup is definitely a player that has a lot going for him. Mike Gesicki's next in the job battle section here. So Dolphins GM Chris Greer said Gesicki is not being shopped anymore. So it looks like Gesicki's going to stay there. But is that good news? So basically, he's a slot receiver who's playing in an offense that needs their tight ends to block. So that's a problem. It sounds like you had that square peg round hole issue here. So Mike Gesicki's not in a great situation because that offense is going to be about running the ball and the wide receivers. We got Tyreek Hill, we got Jalen Waddle. I just don't see Gesicki being an every down player. I think they'll have other tight ends out to block. I think Gesicki's not a blocker. And I think when he's on the field, they're tipping off their play. And I don't think they want to do that. So I'm very concerned. His snaps are going to be low. His targets are going to be low. And I'm out on him. I just really can't see a world where I would draft him. I don't even know how far he'd have to fall before I'd say, okay. All right, Sony Michel. So one day he's gone. He gets released one day, and the next day he's now a player. Dolphins let him go, and the Chargers have picked him up. Now, this is great. I talked about Michel on yesterday's show, and what I mentioned was, look, Sony Michel's not an efficient runner. If you give him some room, he'll take what's blocked. He had a 4-game stretch last year where he was averaging like 25 touches, roughly 100 yards. So he was making things happen with that, but it was like he was leaving meat on the bone. But that's all the Chargers are really going to need here. We've heard Austin Ekeler, and I'm going to say it again. He was begging for help in the offseason. It looks like Isaiah Spiller was unable to move ahead of Joshua Kelly. I think they reluctantly had Kelly as the number 2 because Spiller wasn't getting it done. Bringing in Michel was a no-brainer. And the reason is they have an emerging offensive line. 4 of their 5 linemen are outstanding. We're not sure what the right tackle situation is going to be. Hopefully it's better than we think. But Michel will be in a situation where defenses are going to be worried about Justin Herbert in the pass. The line is going to be good. So Michel is going to have opportunity to run. In terms of fantasy, yes, why not? Because we already know, I'm going to repeat it, Ekeler doesn't want those grinder carries. So if Michel takes his job over, he could get 200 carries. That's not an issue. I do think it's a slight ding to Ekeler because Ekeler had that massive usage last year. And obviously he'll get his receiving work done, but Michel could be involved in the red zone. Look, we're paying for Eckler's career year. If he sees a significant drop in workload, that is going to be problematic. So we're drafting him really in the top 5 picks in most drafts. And so that is a complete upside play. Can he repeat it? Sure, he's a great player. Love Austin Ekeler. But I think ultimately you lose enough touches. At some point, you've got to have incredible efficiency. And that's, Mike Williams, now is being more integrated in the offense. Josh Palmer has had a great camp. At some point, are the targets going to be spread a little bit more because there are such good options all around? So it's something to consider. If you like Austin Ekeler, go with it because are there a few better players than Austin Ekeler in the passing game? But Sony Michel, look, with the role he could get, he could finish the top 30 running back based on touchdowns and yards, half PPR leagues. Full PPR league, probably like 38, 40, but half PPR leagues, yeah, I think he can make it as high as running back 30. I think he sticks there. All right, Kenyan Drake is next. So Baltimore picks him up. And Gus Edwards out at least 4 weeks, which could be more. J.K. Dobbins, we have no idea what to expect here. We know right now it's uncertain for the start of the season. We doubt he'll have much of a workload early on if he's at this stage right now. And we talk about him all the time. Now, Mike Davis probably starts as the lead guy. We know Mike Davis, the story of Mike Davis, replacement level back, does everything good though. He can catch the ball a little bit. He can block some. He can run inside. He can do a lot of things well. But last year we saw the efficiency really, really fall when they gave him a workload. So, and we have Justice Hill, who really hasn't done much at all in his time in Baltimore. And although he profiles best as a pass catcher, is Lamar Jackson really throwing the ball to his running backs? Probably not so much. So I think Drake could immediately walk into a timeshare with Mike Davis. And Davis has been there throughout camp, and Drake could immediately be better. I probably think Drake is better. And the one thing is Drake's going to go to a situation where he's going to probably have some really good blocking. He last year was with the Raiders, horrible line. He was with the Cardinals, pretty bad line. He goes to the Ravens. They have that mobile quarterback, Lamar Jackson. Again, freeze those linebackers. And we have a line where we get Ronnie Stanley back. They drafted Linderbaum at center. They're going to put multiple tight ends on the field. They're going to mesh the blocking with the quarterback to open gaps. Kenyan Drake could be okay early in the season. I don't know if it's a thing where he has to acclimate to a system. I don't know how well that's, I imagine he'd be okay with this. I don't see that they run anything that's so difficult that he wouldn't be able to handle it. And again, I think pushing Mike Davis at least into a 50-50 would not be unreasonable. Again, I just don't see Justice Hill as a threat. And so, yeah, I think Drake right now, and this all is predicated on Dobbins missing the beginning of the season. If Dobbins is out week 1, then, Dobbins might be 10 to 12, and then Davis might be 8 or so, and then maybe Drake gets 2 or 3, and he's not worth much of anything. But if Dobbins misses, yeah, I think Drake could be a flex play early. I think you're looking at a flex play, and that's about it. And of course, not, again, we're not looking for Lamar Jackson to throw the ball to the backs a ton, but he certainly could help in that capacity if needed. All right. So then next, Mac Hollins. Why am I going to talk about a guy because he just made the roster? And that was it. The story was Mac Hollins made the roster in Las Vegas. But here's the thing. Outside of Devontae Adams and Hunter Renfrow, they got literally nothing. So if one of those guys misses time, basically Mac Hollins has a shot of taking a full-time role. And if you're in a deep league and you can, have a deep bench where you can hold a player for a little while, it's not bad to make an investment in Hollins. When Hollins has been called upon in whatever teams he's been in his career, he always seems to be able to make big plays. And so it sounds like he's maybe not a consistent player, but he's one that can make things happen. And in the short term, with Derek Carr, I think Mac Hollins could be, again, super, deep bench and things like this, and, stashing him. But, you're not drafting him in a typical league with 5 bench spots and something. You're not doing that. But if your draft's going out over 20 rounds, I think there's a case to make for Mac Hollins. Again, it'd be predicated on an injury because they're going to run a lot of 2 tight ends, some 2 running backs scenarios. So it's not going to be like friendly personnel packages where they're running 3 receivers. However, if there's a game where they're getting blown out and you think the game they're going to lose, they may have to go to that. And so he may get some snaps there. All right, Tyler Johnson. Yeah, we're scraping here. He was let go by the Buccaneers, but now he was claimed by the Texans. But kind of a similar deal to Mac Hollins. Outside of Brandon Cooks and Nico Collins, there's like nothing on the depth chart. They even cut Chris Conley. So Tyler Johnson, he wasn't very efficient in his opportunities with Brady, but opportunity is opportunity. And the same thing I said about Mac Hollins. If you have a deeper bench and you have a place to hold him, he could get in. Brandon Cooks doesn't have the most stellar injury history. Nico Collins was banged up last year. They're going to trail a lot. They may have to put 3 receiver sets in frequently. Tyler Johnson could have a regular, job, and maybe he put something together. I mean, wasn't impressed with what he did in Tampa, but opportunity is opportunity. And if you're in a deep league and you need, multiple, like a 3 flex league, you might be able to look at him. And then finally, Trey Sermon. Wow, 49ers cut their losses. They let him go. So now it's that round 3 and 4 problem that the 49ers have. It was Joe Williams a few years ago. Made a big deal out of him. Gone. Trey Sermon, gone. Hey, who was their latest 3rd round pick? Ty Davis Price. Well, I hope that works out. We'll see what happens there. I like it. All right. So that's what we have. Let's see if we have questions here. So Brooklyn Classics, I think you were in earlier. So unfortunately, I think I missed you. I came in late. Bad Jim. Revelation 210 is Kenyan Drake. We talked. Good. Perfect. Good timing. I answered that one. So we're good. Joe, always a good game here for Houston wide receivers. Yes. I think they're going to trail in probably good 14 plus of 17 games this year. So, yes, hopefully they can keep their quarterback Davis Mills upright and healthy. Their offensive line isn't terrible. So, you at least have a chance. And don't worry that Davis Mills looked bad in the preseason. There was no Brandon Cooks out there. So, life will be a little better with him. Eddie Rodriguez, hey, what's up, man? Good to see you as well. Anybody else have questions? I'll be glad to answer. I can hang a couple seconds and see, but if there are no questions, we will get rolling. We've got a week and change till Thursday Night Football next week. We'll get the opening game here. Gainwell or Stevenson. So, all right, so here's what we got to look at. Kenny Gainwell, I believe, already has like the receiving back role, and I think he's going to be prominently used in the red zone. So I think that's a pretty stable role we've got there. It's whether he's able to get more. Having that mobile quarterback in Jalen Hurts is a great thing because if he does get a part of a running role, there's going to be gaps to run. But I like Gainwell's floor. I think he's a very solid player. But look, Ramondre Stevenson, and he's in a different – Gainwell's ADP has gone up. But Stevenson is in a different stratosphere because what we saw last year, and he was getting the Bill Belichick treatment. There were times when they were just shutting him down, deactivated him a couple times. But Stevenson showed bruising runner, good speed. He can make yardage after contact. And I know he didn't get a ton of targets, but he was very good in the receiving game. And, and I know that they were talking about Ty Montgomery, but seriously, Ty Montgomery, I just don't see that happening. So, I think Stevenson is going to be the passing down back there. I really do feel the rhetoric out of Patriots camp makes me believe what I saw last year makes me believe that. I believe this is the type of runner they want. And I'm not knocking, Damian Harris. I understand he's a very, very good player and he'll have a role here too. I just think Stevenson gives them something. It gives them like this attitude. And it sounds stupid, but he really brings an edge to that game. And I really think he could change the mentality of a team. Whereas Damian Harris is a very good runner. He's very effective, but I just don't think he's a tone setter. And I think ultimately, because I think they're fairly equal in productivity, I think the team's going to lean on Stevenson quite a bit. So I do like Stevenson more than Game. I get both if I can on rosters. You should be able to roster them both. And then Juan, do I remember that? Yeah, remember name Jordan Mason? Yes. Opportunity could be there. Randy, good to see you, man. So who's my Eli Mitchell for this year? The running back that surprises and takes over early. Let me open my rankings because whenever I get that on the spot question, it's one of those where I'm just not thinking of my whole board. So this will take a second here, but be one moment. But in terms of the running backs this year, it's always difficult to find those running backs who come out of nowhere because we really break them down so well in the offseason. And I was on Mitchell last year. It's just a matter of I was so worried how was he going to get a spot. I had drafted him in so many leagues ahead of time. So as I'm going down my list, let me go way down here in the running back list and I'll tell you who may come and break out for us this year. So let's see here. Start in the middle of it here. All right. It's a long shot, but Zach Moss is apparently back in the mix in Buffalo. And if Zach Moss puts injuries away, he plays the way they expected him to play. As a long shot because 2 years of bad play. James Cook apparently hadn't had an impressive camp. So, is there a long – again, I don't want you drafting Zach Moss unless you're going 20 rounds out and there's like nothing left. And I think you could look at that and maybe say, yeah, let's take a look here. So that's one idea here. And this is obviously a mid-round pick. He's not out of nowhere. But I do think you could look at Khalil Herbert because the Bears organization, I know they played Montgomery like legitimately full-time with the starters in the last preseason game. But it's possible that Khalil Herbert's a better system fit for their run game, and that could change over the season. So that's something that we need to consider as well. So that said, he's another player. And, and this is another late pick, but this is not a guy that's going to be an Eli Mitchell. But don't sleep on Jerick McKinnon because he will be the third down back. And we saw in the playoffs last year, he runs routes. And Andy Reid can really do some clever things with him. And if they manage to snaps to 15, 20 a game, if you're in a PPR league, he can do some damage. Amir Abdullah in a PPR league, it's very possible he grabs that James White role in the Las Vegas offense under Josh McDaniels, and Amir Abdullah as a receiving threat could do some real damage. And, Benjamin, if James Conner, and I love James Conner, if James Conner somehow misses time, Benjamin really, things clicked for him, and he really had an impressive camp, and he really figured it out. And so he definitely is a player that if he has to step in, he may be more than he had been the last couple of seasons. All right, and then Randy, we got another one from you. What do I think of Julio Jones this year? Wide receiver 5 or 6? Yeah, I think so, and here's why. So I think they're going to limit his snaps. I think we're talking, 20 snaps a game, upside of 30, but they're going to be in high leverage situations. They're going to be in obvious passing downs if they're ever trailing in the red zone. And the thing is, Julio Jones last year, let's throw last year out. He was hurt. He was nowhere near 100%, and it was a weird situation. His whole career, teams – enemy number one, stop Julio Jones, bracket him, do anything you can. And then Matt Ryan would just see the coverage. He would just go somewhere else. Well, he's not going to see any legitimate coverage. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, that's it. Just right there, those two. That is going to mean Mike Evans is not, Julio Jones is not seeing tough coverage, whether that's in the early part of the field, whether it's in the red zone. So as a wide receiver 5, 6, he's going to have spike week. He's going to be volatile. He'll have a couple big games. He'll be volatile, but as a wide receiver 5 or 6, yes. And if you're looking at a game that you think is going to shoot out, those are weeks I think you can play him. All right, looks like that's it for questions. All right, everybody, enjoy your day. Good luck in your drafts, and we will talk soon. Jim Coventry out. You can find me at Jim Coventry NFL on Twitter.